Portsmouth is the second-largest city in the ceremonial county of Hampshire on the south coast of England. Located mainly on Portsea Island, it is the United Kingdom's only island city. Portsmouth is situated 64 miles southwest of London and 19 miles southeast of Southampton. The city has a population of 205,400 and is the only city in the United Kingdom with a greater population density than London. The city of Portsmouth and Portsmouth Football Club are both nicknamed Pompey. As a significant naval port for centuries, Portsmouth has the world's oldest continuously used dry dock and is home to some famous ships, including HMS Warrior, the Tudor Carrack Mary Rose and Lord Nelson's flagship, HMS Victory. By the 19th century, Portsmouth was one of the most fortified cities in the world. During the Second World War, the city served as a pivotal embarkation point for the D-Day landings and was also chosen as the headquarters for the Supreme Allied Commander, Dwight D. Eisenhower. The city was bombed extensively during what was known as the Portsmouth Blitz, which resulted in the deaths of 930 people. Although smaller than in its heyday, the naval base at HMNB Portsmouth remains the largest dockyard for the Royal Navy and is home to two-thirds of the entire surface fleet. The waterfront area and Portsmouth Harbour is dominated by the Spinnaker Tower, a 560 feet landmark which stands as the United Kingdom's 11th tallest structure as well as the tallest outside London. The former HMS Vernon naval shore establishment has since been redeveloped as an area of retail outlets, restaurants, clubs and bars known as Gunwharf Quays, as well as the naval base. Portsmouth International Port is a commercial cruise ship and ferry port which serves international destinations for freight and passenger traffic. Portsmouth forms part of the South Hampshire built-up area which also covers Southampton, Havant, Waterlooville, Eastleigh, Fareham and Gosport. With approximately 860,000 residents, it is the sixth largest urban area in England and the largest in southeast England, forming the centre of one of the United Kingdom's most populous metropolitan areas with a population in excess of 1 million. History. Prehistory. There have been settlements in the area since before Roman times, mostly being offshoots of Portchester, which was a Roman base and possible home port of the Classis Britannica. Some sources maintain the town was founded in 1180 by the Anglo-Norman merchant John de Gisors. Most early records of Portsmouth are thought to have been destroyed by Norman invaders following the Norman conquest of England. The earliest detailed references to Portsmouth can be found in the Southwick cartularies. However, there are records of ʻpɔərtsməthə from the late 9th century, meaning mouth of the Portus harbour. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle entry for 501 claims that ʻpɔərtsməthə was founded by a Saxon warrior called Port. Although Winston Churchill in his A History of the English-Speaking Peoples also states that Portsmouth was founded in 501 by Port, the pirate. Most historians do not accept that origin of the name. The Chronicle states that Hercwom Port on Britannia his sooner be Adamagla mid Cipher Montara Stodhi as Gequaid and ʻpɔərtsməthə off Slogan and Jorma Bretiskmanen, Switherethel Namonen. Medieval. There was no mention of Portsmouth in the Domesday Survey of 1086. Although nearby settlements that were later to form part of Portsmouth were included, it is estimated that the area at the time had a population of no greater than 200 or 300. While Portsea had a small church prior to 1166, Portsmouth's first Anglican chapel was built in 1185 and was dedicated to Thomas Becket. It was erected and run by Augustinian monks of Southwick Priory until the English Reformation. The modern Portsmouth Anglican Cathedral is built on the original location of the chapel. In 1194 King Richard I returned from being held captive in Austria, and shortly summoned a fleet and an army to Portsmouth, which Richard had taken over from Jean de Gisors. On the 2nd of May 1194, Richard I gave Portsmouth its first royal charter granting permission for the borough to hold a 15-day annual, free market fair, weekly markets, and a local court to deal with minor matters. The borough was also exempted from paying the annual tax, with the result that the money could be used for local matters. Richard I later went on to build a number of houses and a hall in Portsmouth. The hall is thought to have been at the current location of the Clarence Barracks. The crescent and 8-point star found on the 13th-century common seal of the borough were derived from the arms of William de Longchamp, Lord Chancellor to Richard I, at the time of the charter. It was, however, Richard himself who granted the town the arms of Isaac Comnenus of Cyprus, whom he had defeated. After Isaac had held Richard's fiancée and sister captive, the king responded by conquering Cyprus during the Third Crusade. His awarding of the arms could possibly reflect a significant involvement of Portsmouth soldiers, sailors or vessels in that operation. The crescent and star, in gold on a blue shield, were subsequently recorded by the College of Arms as the coat of arms of the borough. In 1200 John I reaffirmed the rights and privileges awarded by Richard II. King John's desire to invade Normandy resulted in the establishment of Portsmouth as a permanent naval base. Shortly afterwards, construction began on the first docks, and the Hospital of St. Nicholas, which performed its duties as an almshouse and hospice. During the 13th century, Portsmouth was commonly used by Henry III and Edward I as a base for attacks against France. By the 14th century, commercial interests had grown considerably. Common imports included wool, grain, wheat, woad, wax and iron. However, the port's largest trade was in wine from Bayonne and Bordeaux. In 1338, a French fleet led by Nicolas Béhuchet raided Portsmouth, destroying much of the town, with only the local church and hospital surviving. Edward III gave the town exemption from national taxes to aid reconstruction. Only 10 years later, the town was struck by the Black Death. To prevent the regrowth of Portsmouth as a threat, the French again sacked the town in 1369, 1377 and 1380. Henry V built the first permanent fortifications of Portsmouth. In 1418 he ordered a wooden round tower be built at the mouth of the harbour, which was completed in 1426. Henry VII rebuilt the fortifications with stone, raised a square tower, and assisted Robert Brigandine and Sir Reginald Bray in the construction of the world's first dry dock. Although King Alfred may have used Portsmouth to build ships as early as the 9th century, the first warship recorded as constructed in the town was the Sweepstake, built in the dry dock in 1497. In 1544, with money from the dissolution of the monasteries and in order to combat the growing expectation of an increased conflict with the French, Henry VIII built Southsea Castle and decreed that Portsmouth should be the home of the Royal Navy he had founded. In 1545, from Southsea Castle he saw his vice-flagship Mary Rose sink with a loss of about 500 lives, while going into action against the French fleet. The suburb of Southsea later developed from the castle and naval dockyard. Over the years, Portsmouth's fortifications were rebuilt and improved by successive monarchs. Stuart to George, and in 1628, the unpopular favourite of Charles I, George Villiers, 1st Duke of Buckingham, was stabbed to death in an old Portsmouth pub by a veteran of Villiers' most recent military folly, John Felton. The murder took place in the Greyhound pub on the main High Street, now a private building called Buckingham House. It bears a commemorative plaque marking the event. During the English Civil War, the arsenal of the Square Tower was surrendered by its royalist commander in return for safe passage out of Portsmouth, for himself and the garrison. During the war, the town became a major base for the Parliamentary Navy. Under the Commonwealth, Robert Blake, the father of the Royal Navy, used Portsmouth as his main base during both the Anglo-Dutch War and the Anglo-Spanish War. He died within sight of the town after his final cruise off Cadiz. On 13 May 1787, 11 ships sailed from Portsmouth to establish the first European colony in Australia, marking the beginning of prisoner transports to that continent. It is known today as the first fleet in Australia. Victorian Portsmouth has a long history of supporting the Royal Navy logistically, leading to its importance in the development of the Industrial Revolution. Mark Isambard Brunel, the father of famed Portsmouth engineer Isambard Kingdom Brunel, established in 1802 the world's first mass production line at the Portsmouth Block Mills, producing pulley blocks for rigging on the Royal Navy's ships. At its height, the dockyard was the largest industrial site in the world. The city's nickname Pompey is thought to have derived from the log entry Pom. P. made as ships entered Portsmouth Harbour. Navigational charts use this abbreviation. Another theory is that it is named after the harbour's guard ship, La Pompée, a 74-gun French battleship captured in 1793. Admiral Nelson left Portsmouth for the last time in 1805 to command the fleet that defeated the larger Franco-Spanish fleet at Trafalgar. The Royal Navy's reliance on Portsmouth led to the town becoming the most fortified in Europe, with a network of forts encircling the town. From 1808, the Royal Navy's West Africa Squadron, who were tasked to stop the slave trade, operated out of Portsmouth. On 21 December 1872, a major scientific expedition, the Challenger Expedition, was launched from Portsmouth. In 1818, John Pounds began teaching the working-class children of Portsmouth in what became the country's first ragged school. The schools and the resulting movement aimed to provide education to all children regardless of their ability to pay. They were keenly supported by Charles Dickens, who was born in Portsmouth in 1812. First World War to Second World War. In 1916, the town experienced its first aerial bombardment when a Zeppelin airship bombed it during the First World War. Portsmouth was granted city status in 1926, following a long campaign by the Borough Council. The application was made on the grounds that Portsmouth was the first naval port of the kingdom. 2 years later, the city received the further honour of a Lord Mayoralty. In 1929, the City Council added the motto, "Heaven's Light Our Guide," to the medieval coat of arms. Apart from referring to the celestial objects in the arms, the motto was that of the Star of India. This recalled that troop ships bound for the colony left from the port. Further changes were made to the arms in 1970, when the Portsmouth Museums Trust sponsored the grant of crest, supporters and heraldic badge. The crest and supporters are based on those of the Royal Arms, but altered to show the city's maritime connections. The lions and unicorn have been given fish tails, and a naval crown placed around the latter animal. Around the unicorn is wrapped a representation of the mighty chain of iron, a Tudor defensive boom across Portsmouth Harbour. During the Second World War, the city was bombed extensively, destroying many houses and the Guildhall. The air raids caused the death of 930 people, and injured nearly 3,000 more, many in the dockyard and the naval and military establishments. Portsmouth's status as a major port was the key factor in the Luftwaffe's decision to bomb it so heavily. While most of the city has since been rebuilt, developers still occasionally find unexploded bombs in the area. Southsea Beach and Portsmouth Harbour were vital military embarkation points for the D-Day landings on 6 June 1944. Southwick House, just to the north of Portsmouth, had been chosen as the headquarters for the Supreme Allied Commander, U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Post-war, after the war, much of the city's housing stock was damaged and more was cleared in an attempt to improve the quality of housing. Those affected were moved out from the center of the city to new developments such as Paulsgrove and Lee Park. Post-war redevelopment throughout the country was characterized by utilitarian and brutalist architecture. with Portsmouth's Tricorn Centre one of the most famous examples. In 2001, redevelopment of the HMS Vernon Naval Shore establishment began as a complex of retail outlets, clubs, bars and a large shopping centre known as Gunwharf Quays. In 2003, construction of the 552 feet tall Spinnaker Tower began at Gunwharf Quays with sponsorship from the National Lottery. In late 2004, the Tricorn Centre, dubbed the ugliest building in the UK, was demolished after years of debate over the expenses of demolition, and controversy as to whether it was worth preserving as an example of 1960s brutalist architecture. The city celebrated the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Trafalgar in 2005. With Queen Elizabeth II being present at a formal fleet review and a staged mock battle. Geography: Portsmouth Harbour. East-facing aerial view of Portsmouth. View over Portsmouth from Portsdown Hill. Aerial view of Portsmouth city centre from Spinnaker Tower. Geological map of the Hampshire Basin. Most of the city of Portsmouth lies on Portsea Island. As a consequence of its island nature, it is the most densely populated city in the UK, and the only island city. Portsea Island is separated from the mainland island of Great Britain to the north by a narrow creek, known as Portsbridge Creek. The creek, and hence access to Portsmouth, is bridged in only 6 locations. This means Portsmouth is an island, not a peninsula. These include 3 road bridges, a railway bridge and 2 foot bridges. In addition to the 6 bridges, there are several ferries. Maps sometimes illustrate Portsea Island as a peninsula of the island of Great Britain, which is incorrect. The sheltered Portsmouth Harbour lies to the west of Portsea Island, and the large tidal bay of Langstone Harbour is to the east. The Hillsea Lines are a series of defunct fortifications on the north coast of the island which border the creek and the mainland. To the north of the city, Portsdown Hill dominates the skyline, providing a panoramic view over the island. The hill is the location of several large Palmerston forts: Fort Ferrum, Fort Wellington, Fort Nelson, Fort Southwick, Fort Widley. Fort Purbrick were built in the 19th century, and designed to protect Portsmouth in the event of principally an inland attack. Northern areas of the city include Stamshaw, Hillsea and Copner, while north of the creek Cossam, Drayton, Farlington and Port Solent also form part of the city. To the south are the waters of the Solent, with the approaches to Portsmouth Harbour and the Isle of Wight beyond. The southern waterfront of the city is dominated by a series of fortifications including the Round Tower, the Square Tower and Southsea Castle. However, the more recently constructed 170-metre Spinnaker Tower is the tallest building in the city and provides, on clear days, views of the entire Solent geographical area. Old Portsmouth, located in the southwest of the city, is the oldest part of the city and includes Portsmouth Point and the historic waterfront area, known as Spice Island. Literally outside of the law once the city gates were closed, it was infamous for its pubs and other establishments, which attracted sailors on their runs ashore. The main southern part of the city comprises the area known as Southsea, and to the east, the area known as Eastney. The west of the city is mainly council estates such as Buckland, Landport and Portsea. These were built to replace Victorian terraces destroyed by bombing in the Second World War. After the war, the massive estate of Lee Park was built to solve the chronic housing shortage during the post-war reconstruction. Since the early 2000s, the estate has been entirely under the jurisdiction of Havant Borough Council, but Portsmouth City Council remains the landlord for these properties, thus making it the biggest landowner in Havant Borough. The city centre is the main shopping area in Portsmouth, mainly sited around the shopping streets Commercial Road, Edinburgh Road, Arundel Street, Craswell Street and Charlotte Street. The city centre is home to the Cascades Shopping Centre, Debenhams department store and most major high street stores. Portsmouth and Southsea Railway Station is located to the south of the city centre, close to the Guildhall and the civic offices. Just to the south of the Guildhall is Guildhall Walk, a nightlife area and street which has many bars and clubs. Located in Edinburgh Road is the Portsmouth Roman Catholic Cathedral and Victoria Park, a 15-acre park named after Queen Victoria, which opened in 1878. In the centre of the island are the districts of North End and Fratton. Geology: the city is located in the Hampshire basin. Portsdown Hill is formed by a large band of chalk. The rest of Portsea Island is composed of layers of London clay and sand, formed principally during the Upper and Lower Eocene era. Being a seaside and island city, it is low-lying. The majority of its surface area is only about 3 meters above sea level. The highest natural point on Portsea Island is Kingston Cross, although the road surface over Fratton Railway Bridge reaches 25. There are, therefore, dangers that rising sea levels as a result of global warming could cause serious damage to the city. Climate: Portsmouth has a temperate oceanic climate, similar to much of southern Britain. During winter frosts are light and short-lived and snow quite rare, with temperatures rarely dropping below freezing. As the city is surrounded by water and densely populated, and Portsdown Hill protects the city from cold northerly winds, the average maximum temperature in January is 10 degrees Celsius, with the average minimum being 5 degrees Celsius. The lowest temperature recorded is -8 degrees Celsius. In summer, a temperature of 30 degrees Celsius can occasionally be attained, particularly in more sheltered spots. But temperatures rarely reach much more than that because of the cooling influence of the sea. The average maximum temperature in July is 22 degrees Celsius, with the average minimum being 15 degrees Celsius. The highest temperature recorded is 35 degrees Celsius. As it is located on the south coast, Portsmouth receives more sunshine per annum than most of the UK and much of Western Europe. The city gets around 645 millimeters of rain a year, with a minimum of 1 millimeter of rain reported on 103 days a year.